Hello everyone, this is Neve, and I'm coming to you with Chains, an Eyeless Jack X Reader. We're going to be starting off with Chapter 44, Jack's POV. The dictionary described the term humidity as the amount of moisture in the air. Jack, however, described it as his worst enemy on a hot day. He and YN were currently sprawled across the couch and armchair in the living room, and neither of them were moving. Earlier, they foolishly tried to go to the clearing to continue working on the dummies, which turned out to be a bad idea. Ultimately, it resulted in them both returning to the comfort of the air-conditioned cabin after 10 minutes of inhaling heat instead of actually breathing. Since then, they'd entered a state of lethargy as they attempted to recover from the heat. For once, he ditched his trademark black hoodie, even changed his t-shirt because the other one was so damp with sweat. YN also changed our clothes and enviously eyed her shorts and V-neck top. For once, he wished she wasn't there. Not because he was mad at her or anything, but because of his stupid self-consciousness about his skin. Were he alone, he'd lounge around in his boxers and a tank top, but nope, she was there with him, and he didn't want to show off any more of his stupid gray skin than he had to. So he stuck in a navy t-shirt and black sweatpants. Just showing his arms took a lot of determination. He gave a small sigh at the thought. Recently, she claimed his face didn't scare her, but was that true? He didn't know for sure, and because of that, he still had to wear a stupid mask, too. It wasn't exactly a very breathable material, it just made his face even hotter. Growling slightly to himself, he got off the armchair, ignoring the curious glance YN cast him as he stalked to his room. Closing the door, he removed the mask and took several deep breaths, flopping onto the bed as he waited for the heat to leave his face. Heat. How could anyone function in heat? And why did it have to be so humid? Was it going to rain soon? He hoped not. YN's window was still broken and boarded up after all, and if it did rain, he'd let her take the bed and sleep on the lumpy couch. He'd promised to take responsibility for the broken window, and he meant it. At this rate, though, he might have to do it even if it didn't rain, because the heat was so ridiculous and her room would be too hot. Sighing, he rolled his head to the side, closing his hollow eyes. So hard, so warm, so sleepy. Reader's POV. Since coming to Jack's cabin, most of my time has been spent cooped up inside, usually due to a mixture of fear and being chained to a freaking bed. Back then, I'd sworn to myself multiple times that if I ever got a chance to go outside, I would take everyone. Now I found that promise to be absolutely idiotic and stupid. I sighed as I draped myself over the armchair, wearing the airiest V-neck I owned and still tugging on the collar. One of Buddy's friends had once told me she preferred the cold over heat because when it's cold, you can just put on extra layers of clothes. When it's warm, though, you can't take off skin. Never have I appreciated that sentiment more. Part of me also wondered if she remembered me, or if she was one of the people who apparently forgot I existed. As I thought about it, my head rolled over to the side, staring in the general direction of the kitchen table. Though the back of the couch blocked my view, I knew my laptop was there, closed and fully charged. It had been a while since I thought about it. Even now, it still had all those photos and that video of Jack's torture hidden in Buddy's account. Part of me beat myself up for not thinking about it when Jack was out hunting, but I'd been so excited to know he trusted me that it totally slipped my mind. Would now be a good time to delete the files? I sat up slightly, glancing over the back of the couch at the hallway. Jack's door was currently closed, so I had no idea what he was doing in there. Given how self-conscious he was about his face, he seemed pretty likely he went in there to remove his mask. But how long would he be in there? For all I knew, he could come out any second I sit down and log in. That would be a disaster. Also, part of me didn't want to delete them. Call me crazy or stupid, but I actually kind of wanted to see more. I wanted to see what Jack had been through, to know how far Buddy had gone. I know it's morbid and crazy, and that finding out probably won't be good in the long run, but deep down, I feel like I had to know. I guess curiosity is one of my vices, too. I sighed as I thought about it, closing my eyes. Honestly, I wish I'd never found these photos. They've caused me nothing but trouble, yet at the same time, I was glad I did. Knowing Jack's curiosity, eventually he would have stumbled across Buddy's account, and chances were I would have logged in for him if he asked, and then Jack would have seen the photos of himself. Forget wishing I'd never found them. A better wish would be that they never existed, because no matter how many things went, they caused trouble in the end. Another bitter sigh passed my lips. This whole situation was so stupid. Not just the photos, but everything. The guy who raised me since I was a little girl, the only person whose name I ever bothered to remember, the only face I'd see every day, was a murderer. He was a kidnapper, a killer, an all-around horrible man, and then the guy who he kept chained in his basement, an inhuman killer who had to eat organs to survive, kidnapped me. And at some point, he became my friend. How does that even happen? Shouldn't I be terrified of him? My thoughts were interrupted by a soft whimpering, making me freeze. Wait, that sound? Slowly, I undraped myself from the couch and carefully and quietly making my way to the hall. As I approached it, the whimpers became louder until I finally stopped in front of Jack's door. That sound, it was coming from his room. Cautiously, I raised my hand and gently knocked on the door. Jack? I called tentatively. No response. Just a few moments of silence. Then more whimpering. Hesitantly, I reached for the doorknob, turning it and opening it a crack. Sure enough, there was Jack on his bed, curled up on top of his covers with his mask next to him. His face was scrunched up as he lay there, occasionally twitching, and once more I recognized an all-too-familiar emotion on his face. Fear. Instantly horrible indecision racked me. Jack was in the middle of another nightmare. That much was obvious from his whimpers and twitching, and I could picture his dream even as I stared at him, chained in the basement with his arms suspended on his metal fetish mittens while he cried out for help. Buddy standing next to him and laughing as Jack experienced a hellish psychological torture. Just thinking of it made me shudder. However, I couldn't just wake him up. I'd done that before, and it ended with me being tackled and nearly strangled. He'd stopped himself before he could squeeze my neck, but I could still remember the feeling of his hands wrapped around it, making me shudder. I'd learned my lesson, and yet I couldn't just leave him like this. It felt wrong. Slowly opening the door and approaching the bed, I tentatively sat on the edge, staring at his face as he twitched and whimpered softly. He looked so scared, so vulnerable, so helpless, and feeling almost helpless myself, I slowly reached for his head and just started petting him. I just sat there, gently stroking his downy brown hair, and maybe it wasn't the best move, maybe it was even a little stupid, but I honestly had no other ideas on what to do. He stiffened a bit as I started, making me pause, but after a few seconds I hesitantly resumed stroking it. Slowly his body relaxed, and his face relaxed as well, no longer scrunched up in fear, but looking peaceful. A soft smile crossed my face as I continued, relieved that it was actually seeming to help. As I gently rubbed his head, I heard a soft rumbling, surprising me. And when I realized what it was, I almost burst out laughing. Purring. The organ-eating monster was purring. As the realization set in, I snickered, trying to keep myself from laughing. A feat much easier said than done. In a matter of seconds, I failed and just started laughing, and soon enough my laughter stirred him, peeping open a single eye to look at me. "Wyan," he mumbled groggily, staring at me drowsily. "Why are you laughing?" Cat? I choked out between laughs, shaking my head, and he frowned slightly puzzled. "What? You're like a cat." I was holding my sides at this point, and he frowned as he sat up. "What are you talking about? Wait, where's my mask?" "You were purring." I laughed, ignoring his question. "You were actually purring like a cat. Eyeless cat?" This little nickname made me explode with even more laughter while Jack just frowned. "Ha ha, very funny, Wyan." "Oh my gosh, that's why you're so sneaky and good at hunting. You're just like a cat. Eyeless cat. You're eyeless cat." His cheeks tinted a little bit red as I laughed, and he narrowed his eyes as he slowly shook his head. He gave me a small shove, forcing me out the bed and into a standing position before I could fall, but still I kept laughing. "That's it, you're too hyper. No more sugar for you." I just kept laughing as he rose and grabbed my arm, dragging me back to the living room and forgetting about his mask for the moment. Chapter 45. Jack's POV. "Good morning, Jackie." Jack grunted softly at the voice, his eyelids twitching. He was on the edge of sleep, his mind groggy and his breathing shallow. Right now he just wanted to go back to sleep, his eyelids too heavy to open. If given a few seconds, he probably would. Just slip right back into his previous dream. However, he never got the opportunity. A small weight suddenly rested on his head, making him flinch slightly. Grunting once more, he groggily opened one eye, staring at the faded gray carpet which had become so familiar to him lately. Slowly he raised his head, blinking as he tried to see through the groggy blur consuming his vision. A grizzled man was crouched in front of him, offering a bright white grin that seemed to glow in the dim light. "Still waking up, I see." The weight on his head lifted slightly before returning, and Jack realized the weight was the man's hand, patting him. Groggily blinking away the sleep, Jack tried to open his mouth but found himself unable to. Puzzlement filled him as he tried to open it once more, feeling a strange tugging sensation on his skin. Was this tape? Reflexively, he tried to remove it only to hear a rattling sound, and it was at this point he realized he couldn't feel his arms. His sleep began to dissipate as he processed this information, realization slowly starting to dawn on him. The man's smile seemed to grow as Jack's eyes gradually grew wider, the organ eater shrinking away slightly. This man, he'd captured him days, weeks, months ago, keeping him in prison in a basement with his hands stuffed into steel mitts and suspended above his head. No wonder he couldn't feel his arms. It had been ages since they'd gotten proper blood circulation. The tape on his mouth was new, though. As Jack started trying to push at the tape with his tongue, the man chuckled, making him tense and eye him warily. I'm sure you're very confused about the tape on your mouth. After all, you didn't have it when you went to sleep, did you? He paused as if expecting Jack to answer, but the inhuman being just continued watching him warily. He sighed. I know you can't talk, but you could still shake your head or nod, you know. Once more he reached out to pat Jack's head, making him flinch and pull away, but as usual, the chains limited his movement, so the man easily still managed to pat him. Well, you know, it's behavior like this that made me decide to punish you. I just wanted to give you a little pet, but you always pull away. That's not very nice, is it? Lifting his hand from Jack's head, the man looked at him expectantly. After a moment, Jack hesitantly shook his head, and the man's smile returned as he nodded. See, even you agree. With that, he rose, turning and walking away, and Jack watched warily as the man left his line of sight, knowing he wouldn't be gone for long. Sure enough, he returned less than a minute later, and Jack's eyes widened as he recognized the object in his hand. Jack! Jack yelped and gave a giant start, the kitchen table shaking as his legs bumped at its underside. His head snapped upwards to face YN, who sat across the table watching him carefully. Currently, the pair were sitting in the kitchen, and YN eating a breakfast of a sandwich, though currently it was resting on the plate as she stared at him. Taking a shaky breath, Jack waited for his pounding heart to calm down before speaking. Hi, he said lamely, raising a hand at a meek wave. Then he gave a soft groan and raised a hand to his head, a dull pain throbbing in the back of his mind. YN, meanwhile, didn't respond right away, just continued looking at him. Are you okay? She asked hesitantly, and after a moment he nodded, wincing as more pain flooded his head. I'm fine. Doubt seemed to fill her face, though clearly not believing him, and she had plenty of reason not to. If he had eyeballs, he imagined that they would be bloodshot, and right now his head was pounding. Lately, he'd been getting less and less sleep. The summer heat made his room incredibly hot, much of his nights spent tossing and turning in attempts to get more comfortable. And then whenever he did fall asleep, nightmares just plagued him. Memories of those months he lost in that basement. Last night had been no exception, and he shuddered as he recalled waking with tape covering his mouth. YN shot him a strange glance, clearly worried. Are you sure? Sorry, he sighed. I'm just tired, I guess, and I have a killer headache. That much was true, at least. A small sigh passed his lips, and he rose, wincing as a sudden movement aggravated his headache. Walking to the fridge slowly, so as not to make the headache worse, he opened it and retrieved a jar with a liver. YN watched him curiously, swallowing her sandwich. Gonna eat? Yep, he said with a small nod, heading for the front door. Even now, he still chose to go outside to eat, knowing his diet wouldn't exactly be appealing to his pet or roommate. At least she wasn't as disturbed by merely seeing his meals anymore, though that only applied before he ate them. Right now, though, he honestly wasn't all that hungry. Eating just gave him an excuse to leave without any more questions. Don't leave any dead rats on the doorstep. He paused and sighed as he departed without another word, closing the door behind. Another reason to leave, to avoid more cat teasing. Naturally, YN had been jumping on every chance to tease him about his recently discovered propensity to purr, comparing him to cats constantly. Even today, she meowed at him several times, and they hadn't even been up for an hour. A little break was in order. Setting the jar on the wooden floor at the porch, he sank into the rocking chair, leaning back with a sigh. His thoughts reluctantly wandered back to his dream, making him tense slightly and lose any appetite he had. Though he'd rather not think about that time at all, last night's dream had brought back a memory which he couldn't shake from his head, and he closed his eyes as he recalled it. His eyes widened as he recognized a silvery box-like object in the man's hand, a circle protruding from the front with a glass square in the center and a square light in the upper corner. You know what this is, right? The man asked, and Jack gave a wary nod. A camera, that's what the man was holding, a silvery digital camera. The man seemed pleased that Jack recognized it and raising to his eye. Well, say cheese. A bright flash filled Jack's vision, making him flinch and squeeze his eyes with a soft grunt. I've been thinking of making a little scrapbook, the man commented as Jack shook his head in an attempt to rid his vision of the bright spots left by the flash. You were such an adorable pet, after all. I want to be able to look back on these times years from now. Won't that be fun? In the present, Jack shuddered at the memory, hugging himself slightly as if for warmth or comfort. No, that would not be fun. It was clear that man, Buddy, was planning to keep him there for the rest of their lives. The more he thought about it, the more his stomach sank, withering away in that basement for years, never being able to move his arms. Would he have been there forever? What if Buddy died? Would he free Jack before his death, or would he just have been left there to die? Stop thinking about it, he commanded himself, shaking his head. What if some scenarios didn't matter, that Batman was dead. Jack was free now. What mattered was the camera. Throughout his whole captivity, Jack had always been vaguely aware of the presence of cameras. He remembered being blinded by its flash as Buddy examined his hollow eye sockets, and how his eating was often documented with one. Later, after his senses had totally been cut off, there had been a camera on a tripod facing them as Buddy returned his senses. In each instance, the camera's presence was usually just acknowledged in the back of his mind, barely registering in his conscience how he focused on whatever else was going on at the time. Only once did the camera take a major role in his memories, and once again Jack shuddered as he recalled how Buddy gleefully snapped picture after picture of him speaking of how they'd be looking at the photos years in the future. He quickly pushed that thought out of his mind, instead focusing on the camera. Over the course of his captivity, Buddy had taken many, many photos, so where were they? Buddy obviously didn't keep them on his camera. That would be stupid and dangerous with YN around. Besides, if he did, the news articles would probably confirm that Buddy did, in fact, keep someone in the basement, even if police kept the finer details in the media. Hell, the police might totally disregard that and give the media full access to the footage, since it would be pretty obvious Jack wasn't human. On that note, they might just bury the case entirely, since Jack would be suspect number one, and the news of a murderous monster running loose would just cause unnecessary panic. So no, Jack had plenty of reasons to suspect Buddy did not keep photos on the camera or memory card. Right now, only one explanation for where they could be came to mind. As he thought about it, his head started to hurt again, and he gave another groan, leaning forward as he clutched it. Stupid headache. It just keeps seeming to getting worse and worse. Sighing, he briefly closed his eyes, thinking that his vision was partially to blame for the headache. However, as he closed them, he quickly became aware it wasn't the only problem. His body was slumping forward, and thump. That is the end of those two chapters. The chapter after that one is chapter 46. Let me know what you guys thought about that. I apologize for the stuttering. One of those words were really, really hard for me to say for some reason. If you guys liked it, let me know. I said it already, but that's okay. I've had coffee. I'm waking up. You guys have a lovely day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.